The massive Nexus station hung like a shimmering metal flower against the backdrop of stars. Lights flickered across its surface as transport ships came and went, carrying representatives from dozens of worlds. Among them was a small Earth vessel, unremarkable except for the blue and white flag of the United Nations Space Command displayed on its hull. Captain Lee stood at the view screen, watching as they approached the docking bay. His mission was simple: represent humanity's interests at the annual Galactic Congress. Unlike the other captains who had undertaken this mission before, Lee had brought his family. His wife, Dr. Jin, was a xenobiologist, whose research had earned her an invitation, and their 8-year-old daughter Sue had come because the journey coincided with her school break. "It's so big!" Sue pressed her face against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. The station was indeed massive, home to over 30 alien species that made up the Artaxian Empire, the dominant power in this sector of the galaxy. Dr. Jin smiled at her daughter's excitement. "Remember what we talked about, Sue. Stay close to either me or your father at all times." Sue nodded solemnly. She had been briefed extensively about proper behavior on the station. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community. Having achieved faster-than-light travel only 70 years ago, they were still proving themselves worthy of respect among the older species. The reception hall glittered with light reflected. From the crystalline walls, aliens of all descriptions mingled, their translators creating a background hum as languages were converted in real time. Captain Lee was engaged in conversation with a tall, blue-skinned diplomat when he felt a tug at his sleeve. "Where's Sue?" Dr. Jin asked, her voice tight with concern. Lee looked around. Sue had been beside them just moments ago, fascinated by the hovering trays of exotic foods carried by robotic servers. Now she was nowhere to be seen. "She must have wandered off," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Let's split up and find her." Across the station, Sue followed a small glowing creature that resembled a jellyfish. It had drifted past her at the reception, and without thinking, she had pursued it, enchanted by its pulsing lights. The creature led her down several corridors, each less crowded than the last, until she found herself in a quiet section she didn't recognize. The jellyfish-like being disappeared through a doorway marked with symbols Sue couldn't read. She hesitated, then stepped forward. The door slid open automatically. Inside was a room filled with what looked like artifacts. Strange devices and sculptures sat on pedestals, protected by thin force fields that shimmered in the low light. Sue gasped with delight at the beautiful objects. She'd always loved museums, and this was like nothing she'd ever seen on Earth. She didn't notice when the alarm began to sound. Soft at first, then growing louder. She was too absorbed in studying a model of what appeared to be an ancient spacecraft. The security team arrived silently. 4 tall aliens in silver armor, their faces hidden behind reflective masks. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. "Hello," Sue said, turning to them with a smile. "I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to be here. I got lost." The leader of the security team, Commander Bayek, did not lower his weapon. The translation software in his helmet identified the intruder as a human child, but his orders were clear. No unauthorized personnel in the Imperial Heritage Chamber. Ever. "How did you bypass the security protocols?" he demanded. Sue's smile faded. "I just followed a floating light thing. The door opened for me." She took a step back, suddenly afraid. "I want to go back to my parents now." Commander Bayek conferred with his team through their private communication channel. The child claimed to have simply walked in, but that was impossible. The Heritage Chamber had the highest security on the station. She must be a decoy or part of some human plot. "Scan for hidden devices," he ordered. The scan revealed nothing, but Beck's suspicion remained. Humans were known to be cunning, and their technology sometimes surprised even the Empire's experts. "I didn't do anything wrong," Sue said, her voice trembling now. "Please, I just want to find my mom and dad." "Remain still," Beck commanded, raising his weapon. "Any movement will be considered hostile." Sue didn't understand what was happening. Tears welled in her eyes as the alien soldiers surrounded her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. At that moment, The station's internal sensors detected an unauthorized entry to the heritage chamber. The automated defense systems activated, bathing the room in red light. A mechanical voice announced to security. Breach. Beck made a decision. His standing orders for any breach in this section were clear. Neutralize the intruder, he ordered. Sue saw the weapons turn toward her. No, she cried, raising her hands. I'm just... The energy beams struck simultaneously. Sue collapsed to the floor, her small body still. Minutes later, Captain Lee and Dr. Jin, accompanied by station security, burst into the chamber. Dr. Jin's scream echoed through the room when she saw Sue. Captain Lee fell to his knees beside his daughter, gathering her lifeless body in his arms. What have you done? He roared at Commander Bayek. The intruder breached a restricted area, Bayek replied coldly. Protocol was followed. Hours later, Captain Lee stood before the Imperial Regent, Huan, demanding justice. The station's recordings clearly showed Sue had followed a bioluminescent pet that had escaped from one of the delegates. Your security murdered an innocent child, Lee said, his voice raw with grief and rage. Regent Huan looked down at the human with indifference. The child entered a forbidden area. Our laws are clear. The matter is closed. You don't understand. What you've done, Lee said quietly. This isn't over. Is that a threat, Captain? Huan's voice was amused. Your species is but a speck in our empire. Return to your planet and be grateful we allow you to participate in galactic affairs at all. As Lee turned to leave, he transmitted a single message to Earth Command. Sue is dead. The Empire refuses responsibility, awaiting instructions. The response came within minutes. Return immediately. Bring her home. The moon cast silver light across the massive hangar, where the diplomatic ship sat in neat rows. Captain Min stood silently as his crew loaded the last of their belongings. The past 72 hours had been the worst of his life. His daughter, Sue, was gone, murdered by Artaxian security forces for the crime of wandering into the wrong room. The transport is ready, sir, said Lieutenant Zhou, his voice low and respectful. Min nodded but didn't speak. There were no words that could express the hollow feeling in his chest. The image of Sue's small body, lifeless on the cold metal floor of the heritage chamber, was burned into his memory. Back on Earth, Director Kang watched the feeds as human vessels withdrew from Artaxian space. Her office was silent, except for the soft hum of computers. On the wall, a large screen showed the planet Artaxis Prime, seat of the Empire that had ruled this sector of space for over 3,000 years. All vessels accounted for, reported Commander June. The evacuation is complete. Kang nodded. And the message? Delivered to all Imperial command centers simultaneously. On the screen, text appeared. The message that had been sent to every Artaxian governor, military commander, and diplomatic envoy. You killed our child. We warned you. Run. Simple, direct, and according to the Artaxian diplomatic corps, utterly puzzling. They're confused, said Commander June, reading from his tablet. The Imperial Regent Huan has dismissed it as an empty threat. Of course he has, Kang replied, her voice cold. Their society produces offspring by the thousands. They cannot comprehend what the death of a single child means to us. In the 3 days since Sue's death, Earth had activated protocols that had been in place for decades but never used. The Prometheus Directive was now in effect. What do we do next? June asked. Nothing, Kang said. We wait. On the Artaxian homeworld, Imperial Regent Huan reclined on his ceremonial platform, surrounded by advisors. The humans had withdrawn, all their ships and diplomatic personnel after the unfortunate incident with the child intruder. The primitives retreat to lick their wounds, Huan said with a laugh. Their message is meaningless. What could they possibly do against the might of the Empire? Tea Minister Guy bowed low. Most exalted Regent, perhaps we should study this message more carefully. The humans are unpredictable. They are technologically inferior, Huan dismissed with a wave. Their ships are slow and poorly armed. Their weapons are primitive. What threat could they pose? It is not their technology that concerns me, Guy persisted. It is their, irrationality. They seem genuinely enraged over the death of a single offspring. Huan laughed again. How many offspring do you have currently developing in the spawning chambers, Minister Guy? 217. Exalted. Regent. And how many will reach maturity? Perhaps 20 if the bloodline is strong. Exactly. Juan rose to his full height. These humans behave as if each offspring is precious. It is inefficient and foolish. They will learn their place in the galaxy. Throughout Artaxian space, celebrations began. The Empire viewed the human withdrawal as surrender. Military parades filled the streets of major cities. News feeds proclaimed the wisdom of the Imperial Regent in dealing with the human threat. 3. Weeks passed. In a secure research facility deep beneath the Imperial Palace, Chief Scientist Han stared at the data scrolling across his screen, his four eyes widening in alarm. "Run the analysis again," he ordered. His assistant Jun complied. The results were the same. Han moved swiftly through the corridors and into the throne room without waiting for permission to enter. Regent Juan looked up in annoyance. "You forget yourself, Scientist Han." "Forgive me, Exalted Regent, but I have discovered something disturbing." Han held up a data crystal. "The humans have been studying us, not just casually observing, but systematically cataloging weaknesses in our defenses, our financial systems, our communication networks." Juan's expression darkened. "Explain." "Those seemingly primitive ships they sent into our space? They contained advanced sensors. Those diplomatic gifts? Quantum computers gathering data. They've been watching us for decades." "Impossible!" "There's more," Han continued. "We've intercepted communications that mention something called the Prometheus Protocol, and our deep space arrays have detected unusual activity at the edge of human space." Juan stood suddenly. "Are they preparing an attack?" "That's just it. Exalted Regent, we don't know. They understand aspects of physics that we haven't discovered in 4,000 years of scientific advancement. Their true capabilities may far exceed what they've shown us." For the first time in his long reign, Regent Juan felt a chill of fear. Could they have been hiding their true capabilities all this time? Han nodded grimly. "It would appear so. And now they have warned us to run." Across the room, the Imperial data terminal chimed with an incoming message. It was from Earth, a single line of text. "We warned you once. This is your final chance." Chief Scientist Han could not sleep. For 5 straight days, he had been examining the data recovered from human diplomatic gifts left behind during their sudden withdrawal. What he found left him cold with fear. The palace halls were quiet as he made his way to the Emergency Council chamber. 4 of the Empire's highest ministers waited there, along with Imperial Regent Juan. Their faces showed concern, unusual for the normally confident Artaxian leadership. "Begin your report," Regent Juan commanded, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. Han activated the display in the center of the room. 3 weeks ago, the humans sent us a message. "You killed our child. We warned you, run." We dismissed it as emotional nonsense from an inferior species. The scientist touched a control, and a 3-dimensional star map appeared. Tiny red dots began to appear throughout Artaxian territory. "These are communication nodes that have gone silent in the past 24 hours, Han explained. "No attack was detected. They simply stopped working." Minister Guy leaned forward. "A computer virus?" "No," Han replied. "The systems were not damaged. Rather, they were reprogrammed from within." He brought up another display showing lines of code. "We've discovered microscopic quantum computers in every diplomatic gift the humans gave us over the past 30 years. These devices have been collecting data and analyzing our systems." "Impossible," Minister Bong huffed. "Our security scans would have detected such devices." "Not if they operate using physics we don't understand," Han countered. "And there is evidence they do exactly that." Han touched another control. A recording began to play. An intercepted message between 2 human ships at the edge of their territory. "Prometheus Protocol Stage 2 complete," a voice said. "No casualties as ordered." "Confirm 0 casualties," another voice responded. "Remember, this is not about revenge." Han stopped the recording. "The Prometheus Protocol appears to be their response plan, and it is elegant in its restraint. Restraint? Regent Juan questioned. Yes, they could have used these vulnerabilities to kill millions. Instead, they are simply demonstrating their power. Minister Guy looked troubled. What do we know about human responses to threats against their young? Han projected a new image, historical records from Earth. Humans have an unusual relationship with their offspring. Unlike us, they produce few children and invest enormous resources in each one. They have strong emotional bonds that we might find irrational. And when their young are threatened, Regent Juan asked, they become extremely dangerous, Han said simply. Throughout their history, harm to children has triggered their most violent and sustained conflicts. The room fell silent as this information sank in. Show them the weapon scans, Chief Military Officer Zhou said, speaking for the first time. Han nodded and brought up new data. We've detected unusual energy signatures from the edge of human space. Their ships appear to be equipped with weapons technology far beyond what they've previously displayed. How is this possible? Regent Juan demanded. Their vessels seemed primitive. They wanted us to think they were primitive, Han explained. They hid their true capabilities, perhaps waiting until they fully understood our weaknesses. Could they defeat us in battle? Regent Juan's voice was barely audible. Han hesitated. Based on what we now know, yes. Their understanding of subspace, physics appears to be centuries beyond ours. At that moment, the communication system chimed. A message was coming in from every human outpost simultaneously. On the main screen appeared the image of Director Kang, her face calm but determined. People of the Artaxian Empire, she began. 1 month ago, your security forces killed a human child named Su. Your leaders dismissed this as insignificant. The image changed to security footage, showing Su entering the heritage chamber, her face filled with wonder at the artifacts. Then came the footage of the security team surrounding her. The moment of her death was not shown, but the aftermath was clear. Captain Min holding his daughter's body, his face twisted in grief. This is Su, Kang continued as her face reappeared. She was 8 years old. She liked to draw stars and planets. She wanted to be a diplomat like her father. The screen split to show various systems throughout the Empire shutting down. Defense grids, banking networks, transportation hubs. We have disabled these systems to demonstrate our capabilities. We could have done much worse. You have 24 hours to deliver those responsible for Su's death to justice and to accept our terms for new diplomatic relations. The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, Regent Juan looked at his advisors. For the first time in his long rule, he felt true fear. How many more systems are vulnerable? He asked quietly. All of them, Han replied. They've had decades to study our weaknesses. And we know almost nothing about them, Minister Guy added. Regent Juan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his decision was made. Prepare a response. We will comply with their demands. And Commander Bayek? Asked Officer Zhou, referring to the security officer who had ordered Su's death. He will face justice, Regent Juan said. We cannot afford war with the humans, not now that we know what they are capable of. As the ministers left to carry out his orders, Regent Juan remained alone in the chamber. The empire that had stood for thousands of years had never faced a threat like this. An enemy who could have destroyed them but chose not to. He wondered what else they didn't know about humans. Ambassador Moon's ship entered Artaxian space alone. No escort, no weapons, just a single diplomatic vessel carrying Earth's response to the Empire's sudden change of heart. The massive Imperial Palace gleamed under the light of 3 moons as Ambassador Moon's shuttle descended to the landing pad. She wore a simple black uniform with the Earth Alliance insignia, a blue planet surrounded by stars. At her side walked Captain Min, father of Su. His face was a mask of controlled grief. They're scared, Moon whispered to Min as they approached the grand entrance. Remember that. A line of Artaxian officials waited at the palace doors. At their center stood Imperial Regent Juan, his usual ornate robes replaced by simpler clothing. As sign of respect in Artaxian culture, Ambassador Moon, Captain Min, the regent bowed slightly. We welcome you to Artaxis Prime, Moon did not return the bow. "We come seeking justice, not welcome." Inside the Great Hall, hundreds of representatives from across the Empire had gathered. Some had traveled for days to witness this historic meeting. On large screens throughout the hall, billions more watched from their home worlds. Commander Baek knelt at the center of the hall, 4 guards at his sides. He had been stripped of his armor, a mark of disgrace. Regent Huan took his place on a simple chair rather than his usual throne. The Empire acknowledges the grave mistake made by our security forces. Commander Baek has confessed to ordering the death of the human child Su. He gestured to Baek. According to our laws, he faces execution for his crime. A murmur went through the crowd. The execution of an officer for killing a non-Artaxian was unprecedented. Ambassador Moon stepped forward. "We did not come for execution." The crowd fell silent. "Human justice works differently," she continued. "Commander Baek will return with us to Earth. He will spend time with human families. He will learn about our children. He will understand what he took from Captain Min and his wife." Baek looked up, confusion on his alien face. "And then," Regent Huan asked, "then he will return to your empire as an ambassador to prevent such misunderstandings. In the future." The regent's expression showed surprise. "This is your justice, no execution, no imprisonment?" "Justice is not always about punishment," Moon replied. "Sometimes it's about understanding." Captain Min stepped forward. All eyes turned to him, the father whose child had been killed. "My daughter believed all species could learn from each." "Mother," he said, his voice steady despite his pain, "her death should teach something better than revenge." Throughout the palace, screens suddenly activated without command. The Artaxian technicians looked alarmed, but could not shut them down. Each screen showed the same image, a teaching session in an Earth school. Children of various ages sat in a circle. Among them were alien young from a dozen worlds, but no Artaxians. Ambassador Moon gestured to the screens. "This is happening right now on Earth. Our children learn alongside the children of other worlds. The Artaxian Empire is the only major power that does not participate in these exchanges." She turned to face the regent directly. "You've ruled the stars for thousands of years, but you've never understood the most important thing about humans. We value each life, each child, as precious and unique." The screens changed, showing the Prometheus Protocol in action. Military. Faces whose weapons had been quietly disabled. Financial systems altered. Communication networks reprogrammed. "We could have destroyed your empire," Moon said simply. "Instead, we showed restraint." A new document appeared on the main screen, a proposed treaty between Earth and the Empire. "These are our terms," Moon continued. "First, a cultural exchange program focusing on your young and ours. Second, the formation of a Galactic Council, where all species have equal voice. Third, a new set of laws protecting the rights of all children, regardless of species." Regent Huan read through the document carefully. The terms were surprisingly generous. There were no demands for territory, no crippling sanctions, no military concessions beyond what the humans had already demonstrated they could take by force. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why show such mercy?" Captain Min answered, "Because that is what Su would have wanted." The Grand Hall remained silent as the regent considered the treaty. Finally, he spoke. "For 3,000 years, the Artaxian Empire has ruled through strength. We believed that was the only path to respect." He looked at the images still playing on the screens. "Perhaps we have been wrong." He pressed his hand to the document, leaving his biological signature. "We accept your terms." Throughout the Empire, systems began to restore themselves. Defense. Grids came back online. Banking networks resumed operation. Transportation hubs activated. All without any apparent human intervention. As the ceremony concluded, Minister Gi approached Ambassador Moon quietly. "The Prometheus Protocol?" he asked. "How extensive was it?" Moon smiled slightly. "We only showed you what we wanted you to. See? And the rest? Let's hope you never need to find out." That night, news spread across the galaxy. The mighty Artaxian Empire had bent to human demands without a single shot being fired. 7 species that had previously refused alliance with humans now sent urgent requests for diplomatic relations. In her private quarters, Ambassador Moon looked out at the 3 moons of Artaxis Prime. Captain Min stood beside her. "It worked," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, "but at a terrible cost." "Sue would be proud," Min said, his voice breaking slightly. "Her death changed the galaxy." Moon placed her hand on his shoulder. "No child should ever have to pay that price again. And, thanks to the treaty, perhaps none will." Across the stars the message spread: harm a human child, and witness the quiet, unstoppable power of humanity's response. 5 years had passed since the treaty between Earth and the Artaxian Empire. On the once forbidden world of Artaxis Prime, a new building stood among the ancient structures, the Galactic Council headquarters. Its design blended architectural styles from a dozen worlds, including the sweeping curves favored by human architects. Inside the main chamber, representatives from 37 species gathered for the anniversary of what many now called the Child's Warning. At the center of the chamber stood a small statue, a human girl looking up at the stars with wonder. Ambassador Moon entered the chamber, her steps slower than it had been 5 years ago, but her eyes still sharp. Beside her walked a familiar Artaxian figure, Commander Beck, no longer a military officer but now the Empire's chief diplomat to Earth. "Strange to think how much has changed," Beck remarked, his translator conveying the proper emotional tones that Artaxians naturally lacked. "Not strange," Moon replied. "Necessary." The chamber quieted as Imperial Regent Huan took the speaker's position. Age had begun to show on his scaled features, and rumors suggested he would soon step down, the first Artaxian regent in 800 years to willingly surrender power. "5 years ago, a child died in our care," Huan began, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. "We thought it insignificant. We were wrong." Screens around the room displayed images from the new exchange programs established between Earth and the Empire. Human teachers working with young Artaxians, Artaxian scientists studying alongside human students, 100 small collaborations that had once seemed impossible. "The humans could have destroyed us," Huan continued. "Their Prometheus protocol had compromised our most secure systems, yet they chose a different path." In the audience, Captain Min and his wife Jin sat quietly. They had both left military service after Sue's death, dedicating themselves instead to the exchange program. Jin now ran the largest mixed-species school on Artaxis Prime, where children from 24 worlds studied together. "Today we celebrate not just peace," Huan said, "but understanding. The humans taught us that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the greatest power lies in restraint." After the ceremony, Min walked through the memorial garden that surrounded the council building. Each plant had been brought from a different world, a living symbol of cooperation. He stopped at a small blue flower from Earth, Sue's favorite. "Would have loved this place," said a voice behind him. Min turned to find former Regent Huan. Protocol dictated that Min should bow, but Huan waved the formality away. "Your daughter changed everything," Huan said simply. "Not just her," Min replied. "It took all of us, humans and Artaxians, to learn from what happened." They walked together through the garden, an unlikely pair, the father of a murdered child, and the leader who had once dismissed her death as insignificant. "There is something I never told you," Huan said after a while. "When your ships withdrew and you sent your warning, I laughed. I thought humans were weak." Min nodded. "Many did. When your Ambassador Moon showed us how completely your Prometheus protocol had compromised our systems, I expected annihilation. It would have been logical." "Logic isn't everything," Min said. "That is perhaps the most important lesson we have learned from humans," Huan agreed. "Your species combines technological brilliance with emotional depth in a way we never understood before." They reached a small pond where children from several worlds played together, supervised by teachers from Earth and Artaxis. Among them was a young Artaxian girl who had been named Sue in honor of Min's daughter, an unprecedented gesture in Artaxian culture where names were never shared with other species. "The exchange students graduate next month," Huan noted, "the first class to complete the full program." "Yes," Min said with pride. Jin tells me they're already planning diplomatic careers. They want to build on what we've started. And the Prometheus Protocol? Huan asked carefully. Does it still exist? Min smiled slightly. Some questions are better left unanswered, Regent. That evening, a small private ceremony took place in the council garden. Captain Min and Jin stood with Ambassador Moon as they dedicated a new section of the garden, designed specifically for children from all worlds to play together. Young Su, the Artaxian child, approached Min with a drawing, a simple sketch of stars and planets remarkably similar to those his daughter had once made. "For you," she said through her translator. "My teacher says your daughter liked to draw the stars." Min took the drawing with gentle hands. "Thank you. She would have been happy to know you're following in her footsteps." Commander Bayek stood at a respectful distance, watching the interaction. When the ceremony ended, he approached Min. "5 years ago I could not understand why you spared my life," Beck said. "After living among humans, studying your ways, I think I finally begin to see." "What do you see?" Min asked. "That your strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from how deeply you care for each other. One child matters to all of you. It is beautiful in a way I never comprehended before." Min looked up at the stars becoming visible in the evening sky. "Su used to say that the stars were too beautiful for anyone to own them all." "Wise words from one so young," Beck replied. "Children often see truths that adults miss," Min said. "That's why they're worth protecting. All children, from all worlds." As night fell over the garden, representatives from dozens of species lingered, talking quietly among the flowers from 100 different worlds. The stars shone down on a galaxy forever changed by the death of one child and the measured response of her people. In the center of it all stood the small statue of Su, her face turned upward to the stars that had once seemed so far apart, but now connected them all.